Persona 5 Royal is one of the most well-received games of all time at this point. Everywhere you look, you see critical acclaim from critics and gamers alike. But of course, no game is perfect. This is a game that got me through that thing back in 2020, but for some, it did not do that to say the least. So today we're going to jump right into the frying pan and look at some more Steam reviews. Steam reviews are both a blessing and a curse, because on one hand, you'll see a genuine review, where someone is being sincere and or heartfelt about the love or lack thereof for a title. But for the vast majority of reviews, you'll see something absurd, like someone leaving a negative review just to call out people for looking at negative reviews. I mean shit, you didn't have to call me out like that, damn. Anyway, I went through a ton of these negative reviews, and today we're gonna go over them. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, consider dropping a like and a sub. I'm trying to hit 10,000 and it would help a lot. Thank you. Persona 5 Royal is a story-based JRPG, so there were of course many reviews that touched on that aspect in particular, like this one for example. They said their review was initially longer and immediately put a condescending remark toward people who might like the game by saying if it's still too long, they'll like Persona 5. Good start. So they begin by saying Persona 5 focuses more on the cool aspect rather than making sure things stay consistent in the world, lore, and rules of the universe. There is some truth to this, but they don't give any actual examples, so I don't know what exactly they're talking about, so I guess fair enough. They then talk about the whole idea of the story with how the Phantom Thieves operate, which is, again, there's some truth, but I gotta disagree with some parts. So they say that they thought the theme of the game would focus more on the thieves bringing corrupt people to justice, but then the thieves in the game actually end up focusing more on the popularity of the group and what the public wanted them to do instead of what they should have done, which is a major plot point of the game actually. In the early stages of Persona 5 when they're unknown, they do focus solely on bringing bad people to justice just for the sole fact of doing it. But as they become a worldwide phenomenon, they started to lose sight of what they planned to do all along, at least a little bit. Even with this plot point in mind though, they did still bring bad people to justice, that's a fact. Without the Phantom Thieves, Makoto would have been sold off as a drugged up prostitute, people would have still been getting scammed and extorted by the Yakuza, or not Yakuza, but basically, the Mafia basically. Haru would have been forced to marry someone she didn't like, Yusuke would have kept having his art plagiarized, and a lot more. Regardless of what the actual motive was of stopping a certain individual throughout the narrative, the point still stands. Their hearts were in the right place and they absolutely did bring bad people to justice. They were just fighting against an entire corrupt government and society and got in way over their heads, as you'd expect from a group of high school students with the power no one else in the world has. If you don't like this approach, that's totally valid because it's not perfect, but this was a deliberate story decision. It wasn't an accident like it seems like they might think it is. I'm not sure because the way they worded it, I don't know. The way they worded the review is kind of weird to me. It's one of the major themes of Persona 5 at large either way. Something I actually do kind of agree with on their critique of the story is that the redemption of the climaxes of each arc is kind of underwhelming actually. Past the first one, most of them happen via a broadcast in Shibuya where the villain confesses to their misdeeds on live TV. Which of course makes sense considering the scale of villains constantly got higher and higher. They're not going to be able to see them in person. But not seeing these things happen in person or in a more direct way made the payoff feel less personal. This isn't a make or break for me, but I'm glad I could find some common ground with this review. This person didn't hate everything. I mean, they hated almost everything, but I don't know if anyone can hate the music of Persona 5. If nothing else, this video has cemented the fact that Persona 5 has one of the best soundtracks of all time. I didn't see not one review say the music was bad. Everybody liked it. Very impressive. Besides the condescending comment at the start of this review, it actually wasn't a bad review. Honestly, I actually agree with a little bit of it, even if I do disagree with the major things. But shit, I think we've all been guilty of saying something off the cuff about something we don't like every now and then. We tend to exaggerate our feelings a lot. The most mind-numbing complaint I see every time I do one of these Steam review escapades is that Atlus games have too much dialogue, and every single time I see this, I can only roll my eyes slightly. Not too hard, just slightly. Because I expect it every time, but it's still just amazing that people buy JRPGs and don't expect to see a lot of dialogue. This is especially the case when Atlus has the SMT series, which is focused a lot more on the gameplay than the story. I beg y'all, if you think Persona has too much dialogue or is too slow or whatever, try SMT instead. And if you don't like SMT, then try something from a whole different company. Maybe you'll like Final Fantasy 16, something like that. The tutorial of Persona 5 is long, yes. The game has tons of dialogue, yes. The game has tons of cutscenes, yes. But what I find fascinating about these complaints is you seldom hear a critique like this for a game series like Metal Gear, where those games have a higher cutscene or dialogue to game ratio. Something like Metal Gear Solid 4 has, I don't know, like 10 hours or more of cutscenes and about 4 to 5 hours of gameplay if I had to guess. And I still don't hear this complaint as often as I do for Persona 5. I don't know why JRPGs in particular get put under this lens of too much dialogue, but everyone loves Metal Gear, including me. I love Metal Gear. Metal Gear Solid 2 is still my favorite game of all time, but I don't get the complaints of like Persona or just whatever JRPGs having too much dialogue. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if it's JRPG fans, a stigma against JRPGs in general, the length of JRPGs in comparison to something like Metal Gear, but simply put, if you do not like games with lots of dialogue, then JRPGs and by proxy Persona are not for you. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's a valid reason to not like them, but that's just my take on this discussion. Alongside the story, the second most important thing for Persona in basically every game ever made is the gameplay. And the gameplay is pretty divisive in Persona 5, I found. Some think it's the best in the series, some think it's horrible, some think it's too easy, too hard, all that good jazz. The amount of people I saw complaining about the spaceship boss was kind of baffling because I really didn't think that boss was that bad, but apparently a lot of people did not like it and struggled with it. So fair enough on that. The most common complaint for the gameplay of Persona 5 Royal is that the game is too easy. I've talked about difficulty in Persona a lot. I made a whole video for it and I talk about it in every review I do at this point, but I shall talk about it again because it is a fun topic, I can't lie. Many people feel like while the game has a lot of mechanics, like weaknesses, crits, technicals, baton pass, all that good jazz, the game isn't well balanced around the fact the player has access to these tools. And this is the main critique I can totally understand. I actually can't even disagree. I personally enjoy the game despite how easy it is. But I mean, come on, when the game technically gets easier on the hardest difficulty because you actually deal more damage on it, then I think that is grounds for criticism. Persona is meant to be an easier, more entry-level JRPG, but damn bro, at least make the merciless difficulty actually like merciless, you know? If anything, it's more merciful than anything. Why do you do more damage on merciless than safe? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know why games think it's a good idea to make you do more damage and take more damage on higher difficulties. This isn't just a Persona issue, by the way. Games like Metal Gear Rising do this too, albeit a little smarter than the way Persona 5 Royal does it. It isn't a good way to balance a game, like, at all. It's like making every game Heaven or Hell difficulty from the Devil May Cry series, where both you and the enemies die in one hit. It's like, wow, this game has tons of depth, it's really cool, but you can't use it, so yeah. I don't want it to seem like I don't like the game, because again, I really love the gameplay loop of Persona 5 Royal, but there are so many broken things in it and what are essentially safety nets that make it harder to make the game a challenge than it is to make the game easy, which is a bit bizarre if you ask me personally. What do y'all think though? Do you fuck with the gameplay and difficulty of Persona 5 Royal, or do you agree that it's underwhelming in terms of difficulty? Or shit, maybe you just don't like it at all, let me know. Right alongside the gameplay discussion comes the topic of DLC. Some think the DLC ruined the game, and a lot of different complaints that obviously contradict each other are to come, but we'll try to make sense of it all. This review here says the gameplay is bad because DLC breaks the game, and since it can't be removed on the PC version, you're forced to deal with it. They enjoyed everything about the game, but apparently the DLC ruined it that much for them, which is pretty interesting. I can understand the frustration of not being able to turn DLC off in any capacity, because sometimes the DLC personas can mess up the process of fusing, or maybe you just want the game to be more vanilla, either way, but to say it completely ruins the game is just an interesting perspective to say the least. They even admit in the review you can just not use them, so if you just don't use them, then they can't ruin the gameplay. Like it's literally impossible. It's like that Doom tweet, you control the buttons you press. I don't really understand. They mention Izanagi no Okami Pikaro as part of the negative, but with how fusing in Persona 5 Royal works, you can't actually fuse him until you're the adequate level. He's level 89, so it can't possibly ruin the game unless you power level against the Reaper immediately or summon him from the compendium manually. So I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really comprehending the complaint. Especially when Izanagi no Okami Pikaro is a special fusion, you can't even accidentally summon it. The most bizarre take of this review is that DLC personas should be New Game Plus only, which is a terrible idea. Imagine paying for a piece of content in a game and they're like, whoa, slow your roll, buddy. You thought you could use our DLC content that you bought? In our game? No, you gotta beat the game first. But I already paid, I gave you money. No, shut up. Beat the game first. It's just a bad idea. So in summary, this review is pretty bizarre, but not being able to disable or enable DLC, I can kind of understand. A very common theme I saw while looking at these reviews is that people like Persona 4 Golden, but not Persona 5 Royal, which I thought was a really interesting thing to see, because as a Persona 4 fanboy, I love both games, so this was eye-opening to see different perspectives. This review, for example, said the character writing in Persona 5 was worse than Persona 4 and 3, which is like, okay, fair enough, I can see that, and then went on to say the game's story is bad for a few reasons. The point that stuck out to me though is when they said, and I quote, "It refuses to commit to anything, be it character deaths or even a conclusion to the game's events. It's genuinely exhausting." And since they said they enjoyed Persona 4 Golden, this stood out as bizarre. I won't spoil anything, but Persona 4 absolutely did not commit to character deaths. There is a very famous scene where a certain someone seemingly dies, but they come back afterward. If this is an issue in Persona 5, then I can't see how it's not an issue in Persona 4. As for the conclusion to the game's events, I can actually see it, since the ending of Persona 5 Vanilla, or the palace before the third semester content of Royal, felt very final. Obviously, I love the third semester content. It's some of the best content Persona has to offer, period, if you ask me, but that's besides the point. If someone said they preferred how Persona 5 Vanilla ended over Royal, I wouldn't even argue it, because like I said, I can see it. I don't think that's a crazy take, if that's what they're talking about. They didn't really clarify. This review in particular is super valid, even though I don't totally understand the part about not committing to things. I really enjoyed seeing a level-headed critique of the game after sitting through, quite frankly, mind-numbing reviews that made no sense at all. Shout out to this person for real, man. I'd dab you up to the screen if I could. This next review touches on the same idea, but in a much more blunt way. I don't want to make this video all about P4 versus P5, so I'll make this the last one on this topic. But this reviewer was kinda spitting in some moments, but then lost me in others. They were spitting when they brought up how the dynamic of the investigation team felt more tight-knit than the Phantom Thieves. That's why I think Persona 4 is one of the best games in the series actually, but they lost me on the dungeons and story. For the dungeons, they said Persona 5 Royal focuses on quantity and not quality, which I was like, okay, let's see the reasoning. That doesn't really make much sense to me. They didn't like mementos just like they didn't like the dungeons of Persona 4, but then they said they didn't like how long the palaces were. I can understand feeling a little burnt out going through them, but the palaces weren't meant to be done in one day. It's encouraged for time management, but they weren't designed with you doing that in mind. It's why there's safe rooms all over the place. Persona 4's were designed with this in mind more than Persona 5 was for sure. There are absolutely some moments in the palaces where I feel like it goes on too long though. Like the ship palace probably could have been trimmed down in size, because that whole mouse gimmick, while cute, made it take forever. Other than that, I really didn't feel like it took that long at all, not long enough to complain about. I enjoyed how much longer the dungeons were than Golden, to be honest, because I felt like there was almost no dungeon crawling in Persona 4. You'd get a dungeon done in like 40 minutes to an hour, story and gameplay included, and then bam, you're done for like, I don't even know how long in the story, it takes a while. As good as the social parts of Persona are, I do actually want to fight the demons and use my persona, you know? Even though I wholeheartedly disagree with this, it's fair enough. I'm not going to sit here and act like this is an invalid opinion. As for the story, they talked about how in Persona 4 the detective mystery made the game feel more exciting, whereas in Persona 5 they deduced the masterminds quickly. Fair enough to enjoy the detective aspect more, but Persona 5 isn't a detective game. You can't go into it expecting that plotline when it's just not that kind of game and be disappointed when that's the case. That's like walking into a Mexican restaurant and being mad they're not actually selling Indian food. It's just kind of bizarre to me. They then talk about the character writing, all that good jazz. Like I said, I don't entirely disagree that P4 had better character writing. They talk about romance after that, but romance in Persona is just pure garbage to me, period. So there's my hot take of the video. So basically, they just did not like this game much at all. Didn't like the story, the gameplay, and only enjoyed smaller aspects like the music and presentation. Many of the takes were bizarre to me and I couldn't disagree more, but even a review like this isn't outlandish, it's a valid review. They gave their reasonings and that's all I can really ask for. This next review I don't think is valid because they say something that makes no damn sense at all, so I'm gonna be ignorant, not even gonna lie, I'm not reading the whole review, I'm just gonna say this. They said the story feels like a mix of Final Fantasy and Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Now, not only do they not elaborate on what that means at all, but let's just take a quick Google search. When was Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal released? Okay, how about Genshin and Honkai? Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, enough said. Beyond even the story, gameplay, or whatever, almost every single negative review mentioned Denuvo in one way or another. For those unaware, Denuvo is a digital rights management system that's supposed to combat piracy, but it almost always comes with other side effects like not being able to play the game offline, or causing issues with performance, or just random shit for no reason. Denuvo is like a plague on PC gaming, so these reviews get 2 thumbs up from me. We've talked about many reviews at this point, so we'll go over some short and funny ones I found while going through them all. Firstly, there was this, which, yeah. Then there's this person who said there's not enough Haru, which I absolutely agree with. Thumbs up from me. This next one though, this was one of my favorites. This person said they could have watched all of Bleach instead of playing Persona 5 Royal, which he admits would have been a worse use of time. This is a crazy sneakness on Bleach, so to all the Bleach fans out there, y'all gotta get to arms. This person said they only play visual novels if it starts with H and ends in Tai, which, you know, cool story. This person had a mental breakdown not being able to romance Takumi, which, damn, there's a lot of Takumi simps in these reviews. Do y'all fuck with Takumi that much? Shit, maybe I do too. Whew. Let me know in the comments. The final one I saw was someone giving a heartfelt memory on how they grew up watching Vanoss gaming as a kid. This was so random, I don't know why it's a negative review, but it made me smile, I'm not even gonna lie. I hope this person's doing well. With the rapid fire reviews out of the way, that's gonna wrap up this deep dive into the Steam reviews for Persona 5 Royal. So what did we learn today? Well, we might not have learned anything groundbreaking, but I do think this was an interesting discussion. I feel like for the most part, the negative reviews of this game were much healthier than they were for something like Metaphor ReFantazio or even Persona 3 Reload. I've seen much worse, so all things considered, I'd consider this video a success. We got to see some actual decent opinions and arguments, and while some of them were not good arguments or takes, that's just the yang to the yin, isn't it? If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like and a subscribe. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subs and it would help a lot. You can even have a free cookie as always. Here you go, homie. It's been your boy Yandere Gogeta, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out, everybody, and have a great day.